The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.
Players from 14 nations converge in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the third annual Spring Chess Classic.
And welcome back to the 2019 Spring Chess Classic. My name is Caleb Denby here, filling in for Ben Simon. As always, I'm joined by Aman Hambleton, doing commentary over today's games in round 8 of the Chess Classic. So let's take a look at our standings, actually, going into the 8th round. Let's see where everybody stacks up. Of course, there's Jeffrey Zhang and Ilya Nizhnik in a tie for first after Jeffrey drew his game yesterday, and Ilya pulled out a win in a rook endgame against Eric Hansen. And that was actually the only decisive result of the game yesterday.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. We've actually had a number of rounds where every game has even been drawn, and we've experienced some big pileups at the top of the table for that first place spot. But now Nizhnik sort of puts his name in the hat as we're wrapping up the tournament tomorrow, and all of a sudden he's at the top of the table. Absolutely.
Arian Tari and Ray Robson are actually both still within striking distance. So if they have a couple good games going into these final rounds, we might see them come from behind to win the event.
Definitely, no, anyone can win at this point.
Yeah. Moving on to Group B, let's see who we've got up near the top. We've got Baijin Ji still pulling far ahead with 5.5 out of 7. Everybody else, still seemingly, left in the dust.
Yeah, no, Baijin Shi is made a statement earlier in the tournament with a lot of wins in a row, and then now it seems that he can almost just draw. I mean, he already finished his game today, for example, so he's up to 6 points, and barring another player winning the last 2 games in a row, or maybe a disaster for him in the final round, he does look like the front runner to win the B group.
Absolutely. I guess we'll have to see today if British Bullets can pull off a couple nice wins to try and close that gap. Moving on, let's see what kind of format the players are playing in these 2 tournaments, or 2 events, rather. There are 2 10-player round robins, actually. The time control for both is, of course, 90 minutes for 40 moves, with the classic 30-second increment starting from move 1. At move 40, the players actually do receive an extra 30 minutes to finish out the game. As always, there's also the 30-move draw rule in effect, so there will be no draws before move 30, unless, of course, we see a repetition of moves. Moving on, of course, you guys are always welcome to watch this live on YouTube. I think we've got the YouTube chat pulled up here. It's good to see you guys in here. Tommy LeBlanc, I saw a viola player in there as well. Miguel Rodriguez.
The comments are flowing. That's nice. Keep them coming, guys.
Good to see you guys. Also, the games are live on USChessChamps.com if you want to follow along and play through the moves yourself. Now let's actually take a look at the pairings for today. So in Group A, of course, we have Benjamin Bach playing against Arian Tari, Ray Robson against Var Kobian. Ilya Nizhnik was paired against Lequang Liem. We've got Ivan Chuk against Eric Hansen. And finally, our key matchup of the day, we've got Rustam Kazimzhanov playing Jeffrey Zhang. Of course, Rustam is struggling a bit this tournament, not managing to find any wins. And Jeffrey, of course, in a tie for the lead. So this might be a decent chance for Jeffrey to pull ahead of Ilya.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling sometimes when you play these closed tournaments, because sometimes in the final rounds it's not like a Swiss where you're playing someone who may be fighting for first place with you. You could be playing the guy in last place. So although we see a mismatch maybe about how the players are doing in the tournament, I don't think the Kazimzhanov, he may be actually one of the more unpredictable opponents, could be tough for Jeffrey here.
Yeah, a veteran in the chess scene for sure. And let's actually take a look at their game and see how they're doing.
Yeah, we got this this game up here. You can see the players on the screen already. I mean, Kazimzhanov sipping that tea. I'm a little nervous if I'm Jeffrey. Kazimzhanov looks like a guy who has nothing to lose.
Yeah, he's looking very stoic, stoic at the board.
Right. We can jump to the beginning of this game and just sort of see what happened and how we got here. As Kazimzhanov and Jeffrey elected to go into a little bit of theory. And this has all been more or less played before. This idea of queen b6, white reacts with a3, and Jeffrey is probably smart enough not to go grab this guy on b2.
The classic queen trap.
Right. This is times when I really miss Ben Simon on the broadcast, because I could really get Ben to fall into the trap. Take that pawn.
Wait, can't he play? Oh, no. You've got me there.
Exactly, exactly.
Queen is stuck.
We miss you, Ben. So this is the whole idea. You play a3, and it's kind of nicer than any of these other weird moves to defend the pawn. So a3 is quite a useful move. Knight d7, and pretty quickly we actually saw Rustem clarify the center with f5, and generally black doesn't want to take and give up the d5 square and sort of give these pieces for white really easy access to the position. So kind of more of a forcing sequence, and from here I think we can kind of envision black's setup a little bit. Maybe rook c8, maybe in the future he castles. But I don't know if I would be brave enough. What about you? If white was castling this way, do you have the guts to castle kingside when that pawn storm might be coming up the board?
Gotta tell you, I'm liking the e8 square for my king at the moment.
Right. Maybe
so
stay in the center.
The idea in all these positions for white is always to try to stick a piece on d5, right? So how close is white to actually achieving something like that here?
Right. Yeah. If this knight, for example, vacates, you always have that idea of taking here, and even if the bishop's on e7, you can do a similar idea, try to use that square. But really ideal for white is always if somehow we can trade these light squared bishops, gain control of the d5 square, like you mentioned.
Right.
But yeah, it's still quite a struggle because you never want to be taking back with the pawn, and for the moment it looks like he's gonna have to work a little bit harder to achieve that. Queen f3, and we sort of see black's position developing as we expected, and this g4 move is the type to really scare you away from castling kingside here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Castling queenside, though, is not any better, as we see black's queenside is also completely exposed here. So, as you mentioned, king on e8 might be the safest place for it, despite all the advice we get to always castle. Knight c5, and this was, this h4 move. The queen on f3 guards the rook on h1, so there really are ideas like just very quickly g5, and then either g6 or f6 coming up next. And Jeffrey's looking at a position where he's still actually struggling to not only complete his development, but that king we keep mentioning that might have to stay in the middle of the board. It's not too comfortable.
Yeah, and the center seems to be fairly close to opening, right? The open d file certainly not helping the king, and
Right.
The e pawn kind of the last defender, keeping that king safe.
Yeah, no, that's a hero right there. Without the e-pawns on the board, I think black would be in serious trouble. And I think we're catching up to the current position here after queen c7, knight g3, and knight d7. I believe that this is the position on the board. Maybe one more move by Rustem. He just played the move b3. So b3 played. Maybe he was a little concerned about b3 by black, sort of prying open the queen side a little bit and using the pressure on the c file. But I'm sort of wondering, does Rustem have a breakthrough here, or is black actually going to get away with leaving his king in the middle for so long?
I also have some questions about the move knight c5 from black here. Is this playable? Because I'm not so sure. I guess white would have to play king b1.
Yeah,
and
probably
then,
king b1.
Is there any way for black to try to break through before white even
Has
gets
time
a
to
chance on the
regroup.
king side?
Yeah, if I grab this, we do have to take with the queen to guard that pawn on c2. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best move, but black always has also this a5, a4, and we could even do that here as well. Bishop b5 checks maybe something I don't want to allow, but I do feel like we got to address this maybe soon, as the b pawn could be taken. As white, I'm thinking about moves like g5, f6, all this kind of stuff. Really making sure that this king doesn't feel comfortable in the center.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think knight c5 is a very reasonable move. The other move that maybe comes to mind for most of us is, well, maybe I just developed my bishop because I'm supposed to have that out by now. What is it, move 22? And black is still not fully developed. So I think the move bishop c5 or knight c5 come to mind here for black. And
what about the e7 square for the bishop? Maybe trying to stave off g5 for a while longer.
Right. Bishop e7, and then you even have the c5 square for the knight.
Absolutely.
To sort of keep both of those ideas in the air. And I think maybe amongst all these moves, there's also queen a5, which, this king might feel a little bit airy on the dark squares here. It's queen a1, queen a3 start to become threats. So it does feel like there's a lot of action around white's king, but again, you have to remember that black's sort of playing without his rook on h8.
Right.
So
And G5 is coming quite soon to
Right.
take advantage of that H file and that king stuck, kind of
Right.
dividing the black pieces.
exactly. So it just looks like all the ideas seem to be there for black, like knight c5, queen a5. We see the potential. White doesn't have many concrete attacking ideas. There's no tactics really, but he is just have this slow plan of g5, f6, maybe g5, g6 as well. Try to open up the light squares. And long term, I mean, he's fully developed, and it seems like maybe White has the better position, let's say, but very very tricky to play, especially with this king.
With all these moves in mind, do you think b3 was actually required from White? It seems like a classic kind of move to slow down Black's pawn storm, but to my eyes, b3 doesn't seem the most dangerous after White could play a move like c3.
Right. C3 after b3 by Black, you mean c3?
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
exactly. No, I think that b3 was he's trying to say maybe that after b3, king b1, that there's like nothing. I think he's trying to say this is the end of the attack, and although knight c5, queen a5 look good, with a king on b1, you're always ready to take that bishop back with your queen, and maybe that buys him the time that he needs to get these kingside moves. So
Understandable.
don't know if it actually was necessary, but it seems like that is going to be his plan if he's going to remain consistent here and stick to the b3 move. So that's probably what he's intending. King b1 looks like a move I'd play next, even if I wasn't provoked, and then just getting those kingside pawns rolling. And we see the time there. Jeffrey is now thinking 26 minutes. Rustem has just under 15, and the players, as we mentioned, on move 22. So actually, they're not that close to move 40. They might see some time pressure here.
Some moves to go.
Yeah.
All right, with that in mind, why don't we take a look at the pairings in Group B for this round and see what we've got going on over there. Looks like we've got Hayden Steingrimson paired against Christian Trilla. We've got Sergei Ehrenberg playing Nicholas Theodorou. Bai Jinji was against Denis Kadrik. As we said, that game has already ended in a draw. Grigory Kaidanov is playing Alexei Sorokin, and of course Berish Bulitz is playing Alexander Mista. And this is going to be our key matchup for the day, actually. So let's see if Berish Bulitz can pull anything off against Mista to try and close that gap between him and Bai Jinji.
Yeah. Barish Politz as well, you can see there, he's undefeated in the tournament so far, and there's not many players who are. So that's a very solid result for him. He's sitting on that +2 score. And late in the tournament, this is actually a matchup between two people who are very close to the top of the table and very high rated in the B group.
Absolutely. So let's take a look and see what's going on the board.
Here we are. There are the players there you can see on the cam. And offhand, it looks like this is one of those positions which is completely different from the one we just looked at. We had all the pieces on in almost the opening position in Kazimjanov's game. And then suddenly we go here, and we're looking at a game that's nearly wrapping up and trading towards an endgame.
Yeah, so both players seem to have the two bishops. Obviously, the standout piece is the e7 pawn.
Right.
And that's going to be pretty much the decider, right? If White is better or if White is worse is going to depend on whether or not he can keep that pawn around.
Yeah, I think it's got a limited life expectancy here. I mean, king f7, and I already don't see how we keep the pawn. Unfortunately for White, this bishop just doesn't seem to be able to enter the action anywhere, whether it's on c4, on this diagonal, and the b5 square is also covered. So Black's pawn structure is actually perfect against this light squared bishop. I don't have time to sort of sneak around. There's no way for me to keep that pawn directly.
Yeah, one line that I noticed, it's White's turn, so if, rook to d7 would be played, of course the black bishop wouldn't really want to vacate that diagonal that the king sits on, or else, bishop f7 might come, or, bishop c4, preventing king f7 might come.
Right.
But if you do see a move like bishop e6 or something, then that leaves the b pawn behind, right? So to my eyes, it looks like the black bishop might be kind of stuck between two jobs that it's trying to carry out.
Well, the nice thing, and probably the savior for Black here, is that in this position, it actually is his move. So he's just played the move king f7. And
oh, okay.
And it
All
means...
right, well then, suddenly...
But that actually means that really the whole evaluation comes down to that one tempo, because had it been White's move, you're exactly right, that play rook d7, and all of a sudden I have to choose between a pawn and this bishop c4 move, and suddenly my king might never access the e-pawn.
Absolutely.
So I think it just came down to that calculation there. But Mista seems to be in time with king f7 now. Though the rook d7 move is still something I would give serious thought to here.
Yeah. At first glance, I thought that might just be met with takes on e7, right? And then tactically, does that work out for black?
Well, first of all, bishop takes e7, and then nicely we got this check here, so we're not dropping our next piece. And if, let's say, rook takes d5, bishop takes b4, and although we've got opposite bishops here, I think it's pretty clear that black has a push. He's got an outside pass pawn potential, and I mean, no doubt he's going to play it on for quite a while.
Yeah, and it's kind of unclear if white has any choice but to go for this endgame because you know, that pawn is not long for this earth.
No, rook d7 is probably on his mind here, but I think he knows he's going to be suffering in some sort of endgame. You just got to pick which one you want.
Absolutely.
Rook d7.
Is there any way to play bishop c4, and is there a better drawing chance in the sole rook endgame where the bishops aren't actually on the board?
Yeah, it feels like bishop c4 is a serious candidate. First of all, if I take here, rook c7 may be appetizing, but I think that if I move this this king, we run into the fact that once again there's a discovered check there. So something like, I don't know, king f6, and if we take, again, that's going to be a check to white's king, hitting the rook, and if we don't try to grab this, then we would fall into check here.
Yeah. Just what happens on bishop c3, for example, for white, maybe, and then trying to pick up this pawn?
Mm-hmm. And then...
well, yeah, okay.
If I give check, it's going to be close. You're going to go run to the bishop here.
It looks like I'm going to end up pinned, right? But maybe I can survive this somehow?
So then we got this endgame, and the question is sort of, is this one winning? I have a feeling that it might be, as black can sort of play king up here, and we have one move to waste. Maybe if I get f4, f3 here.
It's a lot of counting.
That's a lot of counting.
I'm not sure if I'm prepared to do it.
We'll let these guys calculate that.
Absolutely.
But I think that's the type of line that's really scary to be looking at if you're white, where you might get in a king and pawn endgame. That's the way you lose.
Dealing in absolutes is always scary in chess. You know, these are highly committal decisions. So.
But maybe he could try to do that position and just not take the pawn on b7, play a rook endgame down the pawn. So that's another option for him there. Maybe he's... The first thing, though, it's really hard for a chess player is you have to admit that you need to play a pawn down.
Right.
And that's a pretty big decision. Sometimes you might try to hang on to the pawn too much, and that's even worse. You should just let it go and find the best drawing endgame. And he's going to decide whether he can liquidate some bishops here or you know, which one he sort of wants to play.
All right, so we'll let Andre think on that, and let's take a look and see what these players at the top are actually playing for. We've got a fairly large prize fund, actually, for these two groups. First place in the A group is actually walking away with $6,000, which is a full $2,000 ahead of second. So, of course, Jeffrey and Ilya are not going to be willing to let that $2,000 go quite so easily.
Not.
Of course, everybody walks away with something, and 7th through 10th all actually go home with $1,000 themselves. So not too bad. Not too bad for them. And over in the B group, let's take a look. Looks like first place gets $4,000 in the B group. So of course that's looking good for Baijin Shi, but we'll see if of course Bearish Bullets can hold this endgame. And then I think actually that would knock him almost fully out of contention for first place.
Right.
But,
no, I think Baijin Shi, barring his potential loss tomorrow, I mean, players really do need to win 2 games in a row, and Bearish Bullets is the closest to him actually.
Yeah. So it's going to be tough for anyone to be able to catch him there. But all right, I guess let's just go around the boards and see if anything interesting is going on.
Yeah, we got some. Like we've been mentioning, we have a few results in already. In the B group, one game that looks like some action has happened really early was between Hayden Steingrimson and Christian Kirilla. And the reason I say that is because it looked like they were actually going through some theory in that game, but then all of a sudden I just noticed that Kirilla was missing a c-pawn, and I wasn't too sure if this was theory or if maybe he had confused theory in his head or something, because bishop a3, going to take this pawn, and I noticed this position, he just took it.
He just grabbed the pawn. Yeah, we were actually taking a look at this game before the show started, and just looking at the body language of both players, Hayden seems almost confused at the position he's gotten. You know, he's both players kind of fidgety. I think Christian, you know, went for the tea a couple times. You know, he's loading up with the caffeine maybe to prepare for this position.
Yeah.
But yeah, just down the c-pawn. But it looked to my eyes like there was some tactical ways that, you know, Black might be able to regain that later on.
Well, I think based on the time situation, I can sort of infer that nobody at this chessboard has any clue what's going on, because Christian is down to 10 minutes, and they're on move 15.
Goodness
like they actually have so many moves to make until time control, and you know, maybe this started off as something that people knew, but sometimes it's really easy to confuse lines in your head and think, oh, there's usually a line where I can sack this pawn, and maybe he thought it was. But Steingrimsson is sort of calling him out on the potential bluff.
Right.
He says, I'm just going to grab that pawn and show me where the compensation is.
Yeah, it's tough to see immediately, but yeah, how did the game continue? So
Yeah, it was b6, then a6. You're sort of kicking these bishops back. Black always has this idea of, like long-term, I can play a5.
yeah,
and
a5 and
hit the bishop.
Pawn on c3 might end up hanging, right? This is what I was trying to figure out.
Right, so
the show.
he's played the move a6, and it was met with queen a4. Now, that's sort of telling me that maybe the move a5 would also be met with queen a4.
Right.
I don't
absolutely.
know if that would be the reaction, but something like here a5, I mean bishop a3 sort of runs into exactly what Black is looking for, that tactic, but maybe queen a4 here, and it's possible that something just as simple as this, Kirilla thought, oh, that can't be taken because I have b6 a5 winning the bishop, but maybe this queen a4 move was kind of overlooked.
Yeah, but you know, queen a4 did happen on the board after a6, right?
Sure did,
And then after bishop b7, isn't White faced with some of the same problems, right?
Yep. No, here he played the move bishop d3. I have to wonder in this position whether a5 was on his mind or not, because a5 is definitely a consideration, although now it's a little bit different, that you do defend that rook from h1.
Right.
And then the rook swings over to c1, and I'm actually not too embarrassed with my king on e2. It's actually kind of strong.
Right. This is actually a line I was looking at, and here I thought, you know, maybe Black might be able to play something like bishop, you know, c6, and then I guess, you know, queen c4 is an option, but you know, the line I was thinking of might be queen b3, and I thought that looked fine for Black after the captures.
Let's say here.
I wasn't sure how to evaluate this pawn structure.
Offhand, I would say that it looks really annoying for Black. How do I deal with this pawn?
Right.
Because if I castle, I mean, we know Steingrimsson, he's already taken a pawn. He's going to grab another one. He's in the mood today. So it looks like it's tough to castle. And if I play e6, then it's actually very tough to castle. And I got some moves coming with tempo, like rook c1, maybe b4 to open things up. So if I could castle here, I would probably agree, but I feel like the pressure on e7 is actually more annoying than
this looks
than
quite
you think
awkward.
here.
So,
But
yeah,
yes,
not so easy to regain the pawn then.
No, not at all, and not like Kirilla's uncomfortable playing down a pawn, because often in the Grinfeld you do have those positions where you even sack an exchange or sack a pawn, but maybe that wasn't his intention going into the game, and then you sort of have to adjust. So this is us getting closer and closer to current position. The players have made a few moves in the meantime. Just as I was mentioning, he is down to like 10 minutes apiece, so these guys need to speed up.
And kind of a familiar structure here, where Black has the bishops aimed at White's center, but White has the two strong center pawns. But
right, I wish I could say this was familiar, but the only thing that's unfamiliar is like, hey, where's my e-pawn? It used to be on e7, and
suddenly
I feel like if the pawn was on e7, that this should be around even.
Right.
But if there's just a pawn missing, then this has to be seriously in White's favor here.
It's tough to tell, just what Black is supposed to even do here. It seems as though none of his pieces can really move. Besides maybe bringing the knight to f6 could be the next idea. But
yeah, no, I think he's definitely going to be considering a move like knight f6. He would love to get White to play e5 and then maybe sink the knight on d5. I mean, right here, you really can't castle unless you play bishop f8 as Black. So it's not looking good, though. It looks like an easy position for White to play bishop d3, king d2. All look like great moves. Not only is it a healthy extra pawn, but it's a center pawn.
Yeah, and
It's not looking good.
a little bit of a time advantage as well, like you were mentioning. But he's also actually now down to 12 minutes himself. So
Yeah, I think it's probably best case for Kirilla here, because if you're just going to be down a pawn looking for compensation, at least get some time pressure and
Absolutely.
Put you both under pressure and sort of mess things up.
Hope for some mistakes, right?
Hope for some mistakes. I mean, let's not forget, Kirilla survived down a rook yesterday.
Yes.
Down
yes.
an entire rook for a pawn.
Seemingly magically.
Seemingly magically. So I'm not going to sit here and say that this one pawn advantage is enough to topple him, because I've seen what he's capable of. So we'll have to see if Steingrimson can sort of convert this, because it does look to me like this is a serious advantage for him here.
All right. Moving on, I think something about Sorokin might have made a blunder in his game. So let's try and find that one here.
Let's take a look. He's playing Gregory Kaidanov here, and he's got the black pieces. Sorokin, by the way, for those that remember early on, he actually lost his first 2 games in this tournament. It's right at the bottom of the table. Then all of a sudden he flipped the entire tournament around, and I don't think he's lost since. So Alexei Sorokin is definitely a guy to watch, and as we get into these round 8 and round 9 matchups, I don't know if he's going to be feeling more pressure, but I mean, he's got that GM title that he's trying to go for, and not only is this a placement tournament for him, but this is a norm tournament.
Absolutely. Serious chances to get that next norm for him. I'm not sure if he's actually one norm away or a few, but
I believe he's won.
One norm away. So
I believe
this
he's won.
This could be huge for him if he manages to pull out a win in these last couple rounds.
Yeah.
He might just get there.
No, he's already got the rating. Obviously, he's sitting way above 2,500 right now as he competes in this tournament. So it really is just the norms for him. Is he's got the FM title, and he's looking to do some hop, skip, and jumping.
Absolutely.
So what happened the last couple
moves?
moves?
What is this position?
I think this one, I mean, I'm inclined to say that it's like a Grunfeld, but I don't have no idea how it started. It's such a weird position.
A double fianchetto. That's
Yeah, not really a Grunfeld at all, but black sort of is playing like it is a Grunfeld. Where
Right.
you get that D pawn up the board, and you let white take, and you don't take back with a pawn, rather you capture with a piece. Usually, of course, it's that knight on f6, but queen takes on d5, kind of unorthodox, and queen to h5, he's just going for the quick cheese, right? Bishop
Absolutely,
h3,
yeah.
knight g4.
take advantage of that. Those weakened light squares. A very common idea. It almost looks like this is an idea you see often, that white would play against black, in something
Right.
like the Pyrrhic or something similar, where right away before the other player even castles, this attack is already starting.
Yeah, and with queen on h5, I mean, sometimes you'll see the queen, let's say, on d7 and the bishop on e6, and then you're threatening bishop h3, and then if white plays h3 himself, he can't castle because you're sort of hitting that pawn.
Right.
In these situations, it's a little bit different, because after h3, I always have the move g4, which hits the queen, and I can maybe castle with tempo. But I'm used to seeing queen h5 a lot more once I'm already castled, because then there's nothing I can do about bishop h3.
It seems like black's using the extra time he made by not moving the c pawn or the e pawn to kind of launch this attack.
Yeah, no, this is really quick play by Sorokin, and Kaidanov does play h3. He doesn't want any part of bishop h3, developing with tempo. Rook d8, and it's just such an unorthodox position that Sorokin is getting already. You don't see very often just almost no pawns being used as bayonets in the center or to control the center at all.
Purely piece plays. It's very
same,
strange.
Same for white as well. I mean, just nobody is putting pawns in the center. So I think finally, after a few moves here, Kaidanov says, look, it's time to control the center. But, this is actually one of the weirdest opening phases I've seen, where just no one is committing.
Yeah, just trying to stay flexible, I guess, is something both players clearly value a lot in this line.
Yep. Queen to b5. I mean, I think at some point, once your bishop gets kicked out of here, you sort of give up the dream of
right.
of anything on h3. So that queen, I think it was time for it to move. h5, just you almost risk getting trapped in some lines if you stay over there. So and finally, d4, and there's some pressure here. I mean, these are all looking more and more like backward pawns. I mean, it's tough to get e5 in. If you play your b pawn up, then all of a sudden this rook looks really good.
Right.
On the c file.
It would have been nice for black if he could have gotten e5 before white played d4. So maybe maybe he waited slightly too long playing around with his pieces. But,
yeah, no, that's the thing. You got this queen here. You almost don't want to lock it out of all the action, but it's just there's so many things that black has in his position that are a little bit unorthodox. It's hard to play normal moves when the position is not normal.
Sure.
But somehow, actually, Sorokin's pieces are all kind of defending each other. So he's going for this weird construction, like rook d6, queen b5, bishop on f7, and just trying to say that he's watching over all the key squares.
It's almost tough to be mad with a knight on d5. You know, that's something Black strives for in quite a lot of openings.
That's a strong piece. Now this rook is doing heavy duty guarding that knight on c6, very important. But I get the feeling that long term, this queen is going to vacate the e4 square, and then maybe we'll see e4 by white. So something like you know, queen back to b1, c2, even d3, and just e4, maybe d5, e5.
Yeah. My only concern for white here would be that knight on a4. I guess it's coming to b2 and maybe to c4 to knock that rook around, or maybe d3.
Right. Gain some time here. But yeah, that's probably the only piece that white can be critical of in his position. As we catch up to the game, it was actually this move e5 played by Sorokin. So we were talking about finding time for this move. He says there is time, and the time is now. That pin on the d4 pawn is why Kaidanov played rook c4, because actually he simply just couldn't take that right away. Queen a3, of course, now you take it. I mean, that just makes sense.
Yeah, but
and
then,
after rook e8,
oh,
this is where things actually got really forcing, and the players have actually come up with a few more moves on the board here. We can take a look at those. It was rook e8, pinning the pawn, queen b1, getting out of the pin.
Absolutely.
And then b5.
Just b5.
I think at this point, there might be some other issues with the position. I'm curious what they are. One thing that comes to mind is that once this knight moves, for example, takes this pawn, I have to be really careful about either bishop takes d5 or just e4, and this c7 pawn is hanging at the end of a lot of lines.
So maybe it's not so easy to take that pawn back. And something like pawn takes e5 might not be something black wants to do either, right? Because it's
something like knight g5 here already.
Giving away too many squares.
Too many squares, it looks like. So I think that b5 strikes me as one of those moves that you play when maybe you miss something in a line and you sort of have to bail out. It looks complicated, but I feel like it shouldn't be justified. At the very least, we see the continuation in the game. It was takes on d6, takes on c4, b takes c4, and black actually just played the move knight d to b4. If he took the knight there, white was going to capture in the middle, and don't forget, after all these captures, it's going to still be white's turn, so he's going to keep taking everything. But knight b4 was the move played, and this is actually our current position here, as Kaidanov is a little bit lower on the clock here, but it's his move, and things should be in his favor. I think he's just got to do a bit of calculation here. At the very least, seems like maybe he emerges a pawn ahead at the worst.
I guess the current material count is 2 pawns up for white, but of course you have to deal with this knight on a4, which is under attack, and then maybe the d6 pawn will fall. Looks like at the very least, white might be able to play something like queen b3 just to liquidate off black's active pieces and go for a pawn up endgame. But maybe he's trying to find better.
Yeah, queen b3 is a nice kind of move, because if I take and then we take back on d6, again, we are 1 pawn up there, and there's nothing wrong with any of our pieces at that point. He's actually gone for the move d7, just a little in-between move there. Probably rook d8. I mean, just has to be played. And I mean, is he thinking about ideas like keeping that pawn on d7? I'm trying to decide what he's going for here. Queen b3 could also be another way, just a different move order, trying to do that exact same thing. But one thing about queen b3 that I liked earlier was that queen a2 wasn't really possible, because I might take and then take that pawn on c7.
Right,
now
that would be tough for black.
Now that's a little different. I mean, with this pawn here, maybe I lose that, and I've also lost my pawn on a2. I don't want to get
and the a pawn can start to run. But just out of curiosity, after knight c5, it looks like black already has to take some drastic measures, right? Instead of queen b3 for white here.
Okay. Let's say knight c5.
Yeah, maybe something like knight c2 might already have to be played in order to try to get rid of this knight and d7 pawn in turn. But then I was starting to go maybe a little bit crazy, and I was thinking of something like queen b5 for white, trying to sack the exchange to keep that pawn on the board.
Right. Well, the other kind of position that I mean, I'm considering even being greedy here and taking this. I'm wondering if I can get away with it.
Oh wow.
Can he get away with something as ridiculous as this? Because this is actually 100% on the board, knight c5 by Kaidanov, and Sorokin's going to have to come up with some sort of funny business because this pawn is really strong here, and we start to feel the pressure of this bishop on c6.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I don't have a lot of faith in queen takes a2.
No,
but maybe it holds, right?
Right, knight c2 is surely going to be on his mind. These kind of anything to get rid of that knight and sort of round up that pawn on d7, because the longer you leave that pawn there, the more that white is just going to shift the rook over, protect it. Then there's ideas like knight b7, and white's play is actually fairly straightforward. So Kaidanov, I think, here very happy with his position as they're approaching move 30, and he's got about 9 minutes, but when you've got the better position, you're hoping that the moves come a little bit easier.
Right, absolutely. As always, the YouTube chat is interested in Eric Hansen's game, so I guess we can take a look, see what's going on there.
Sure, yeah, he's playing Vasily Ivanchuk in the A group. Let's see how things...
It looks like they've actually ended in a draw already.
Did they? Yeah, their game actually looked very, very even when I last saw it, which was sort of around here. And we had a Queen's Gambit decline where, you know, all four of these pawns at some moment just captured each other.
Absolutely.
And I think the key move for Eric in this game, probably the move that after this I think it's just very equal, is after knight d4 he played the move a5. And I think this a5 move is really important. It gives up some squares here, but more importantly, it secures this knight on c5 from any b4. And I think that would be the only way to maybe jeopardize your position here.
Of course, yeah. And so yeah, with no way to take advantage of the open files, I guess we're probably going to see some major piece trades pretty soon. Along,
Once you secure those two knights, you just move them out of the way, and it's like, look at all the firepower. There you go. That's hidden behind there. Trade all the rooks. I mean, Black's queen is defending all the weak pawns, so this check doesn't mean anything.
Of course, and yeah, no way to really push for either side still, just symmetrical pawns, symmetrical pieces.
Yep, yeah, and that's another game in the bag for Ivanchuk where, you know, no chances really for a win. He's also winless in this A group here, as, you know, no one's giving away easy points.
Right, absolutely. It's very tough competitors this year.
Right. So I think in the A group, that's the second. Lukwang Liem and Nizhnik drew. Now Hansen and Ivanchuk drew. And the other game that I thought was one to keep an eye on was Ray Robson and Varakobian up in that A group. And that game, we can see here, is really spicy. Already a lot of, you know, cover missing for that black king, which is in the center of the board. This looks like another trademark Varakobian French defense.
Absolutely, you know, no fear.
No fear
for Var.
He's scored some wins and some good games actually in the French so far this tournament. So it's really been working, and also the black pieces have done notoriously well. It's not like white's just winning all these games. Black has had a lot of upsets.
Yeah, it's a very crazy position to my eyes. I guess, you know, black is kind of forsaken castling by, you know, playing this h6 g5 pawn break to try to open up white's king. He's kind of, you know, left his king without a home as well. But yeah, how did we get here?
This is just the move I wanted to show in the opening, which sort of clarifies the pawn structure and how we got here. It's this move f5. It's a full pawn. It's a free pawn, and Var's going to take that. You really can't let the guy play f5 and then take on e6. You may as well grab a pawn if you're going to be suffering and being attacked. And the idea is more of a positional approach. It's not, sometimes you sacrifice, you get the piece pawn right back. Sometimes it's more of a positional long-term thing, and that's what we see here. I think this position may strike a lot of people as very good for black. Like after bishop e6, we sort of plug the hole in the position, and we just say like, I've got all my pawns, and you know where's the big attack?
I'd be inclined to agree. You know, black has found squares for all of his pieces. They all seem to be, you know, working together. But white, really is just missing the pawn to break through, I think.
Yeah, no, you're giving it away so you can use these dark squares more effectively with your bishop and queen and sort of reroute these pieces. But it's just kind of interesting saying that you can't castle kingside. And if you castle queenside, I'm also going to open the position there. And meanwhile, it's very difficult for black to ever dream of h6 g5 because suddenly your f-pawn is very weak, and you know white's sort of on the offensive here.
Right.
So it really is this sort of long-term sack that I have a feeling Ray has sort of been over before. It's not something that he came up with at the board.
Understandable.
So we see white trying to play on the dark squares here, and black opening up on the queen side of the board. Again, these positions always feel so good for black, but then the bottom line is once the position opens up, you got a king sitting on e8, and you got some dark square holes, and those can often just come back to bite you. He's opening up everything
so he's
here.
No fear.
Yeah,
like we
and
said
this is the
at
type of move, d5, that, I mean, you almost just have to play. If black gets some sort of hold on the d5 square,
right, then it's,
these pawns, this is a move that, without calculation, I would expect Ray to play.
understandable. So yeah, how does VAR intend to survive this? Because he's down to mere seconds on his clock.
Right.
But,
we actually saw g5, queen c1, and then the brave move, king e7. And this is actually our current position here,
wow.
move 31. VAR has, quite literally, he played that move with 2 seconds on his clock.
Connecting the rooks at all costs.
Yeah.
And looking at the players on the camera there, it looks like he's got some nerves he's working on there.
Yeah, no, Ray's almost looking at this position surgically. He's like wondering, okay, where's the end of this? Let's just point out the rather unfortunate h takes g5 would really hurt White's position here. So that pawn is definitely off limits, even though it looks like we can win the pawn there. So Ray can't be doing that, but at the same time, if we count the pawns, are we technically one pawn ahead here for VAR? I have some dreams of just trading some pieces, bishops, rooks, and trying to get out of this, but with a time advantage and black's king right in the middle of the board, I have to feel like Ray is doing well.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at crazy ideas. So knight takes g5 doesn't work here, for example, but maybe if we play a bishop takes e6, and then a pawn takes c6 maybe, and rook d6. Is there some ideas of trying to break through with knight takes g5 now? Yeah,
we have this idea to try to break through. I would be equally careful of black coming maybe with like a counter idea, like knight takes e5,
of course.
and all of a sudden there's actually 2 things hanging plus a knight takes here, or maybe even knight g4 could be scary in the right move order.
Yeah, of course this would be terrible.
But I think Ray is looking for a knockout punch. The way that he's hovering over that board, he's scanning for knockouts.
He's ready for it, ready to find whatever's there. And it feels like there should be something here, right?
It certainly does. The other thing is that when the guy's got 32 seconds, sometimes, and maybe this is unhealthy, a chess player's mind will wander and not calculate maybe the best move, but the most tricky move.
Absolutely.
The most tricky move, because you just think, oh, there's no way he can see all this stuff with 32 seconds, but...
I've got 20 minutes and I can't see all this stuff,
exactly.
So, how can he?
Yep, and we see, I think, some moves on the board, as you can see the players writing down some moves. That was bishop takes e6, pawn takes e6, and there's a lot of things to consider here. Knight takes g5, even here. Not sure if this is good, but there's definitely potential for having that rook just stuck on h8 and bringing that rook into d6.
Yeah, maybe here king e8 would be forced, because if king f8 you have this queen f6 idea, and then a rook lift might come if you try to defend your rook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this looks fun, but probably unnecessary, honestly, as we see a move on the board, queen c4 there by Ray, and he didn't just play one move. He planned one move and then a response,
moves,
and that's what you're supposed to do when a guy's in time pressure. Is you don't play a move, have him react, and then let him think again. Mm-hmm. He did the right thing. He's got a move ready, and VAR is got to be down to seconds there on the clock, as he's got to really find some good moves here, because what are they on? Move 33. He's got 7 tough moves.
It's so hard not to panic when you find yourself in a situation like this.
Yeah.
Do you want to actually take a look at Jeffrey Zhang's game again? It looks like some moves have been played there, and Rustam is actually in some serious time pressure as well.
Yeah. Time pressure is probably going to be flying in for all of these players here as we jump to another very important game in the A group for the standings, as Jeffrey Zhang is, he needs a draw to maintain the lead along with Ilya Nizhnik, but a win would catapult him ahead and leave him in very good standing going into the final round.
It's a lot to play for here.
We looked at this position right at the start of the show. This was our key matchup, and I think what sort of developed after this move b3 was bishop to c5 and a quick f6 by Rustam. He wants to get his knight in there. He didn't even need
wasting
the move
no
g5.
time. Wasting no time.
So Jeffrey said, no, I'm not opening up the position. Now he's probably planning, okay, if you play g5, I play h5.
Right.
You play h5, I play g5. And I think we saw basically exactly that. The queen got out to a5, forcing the king up, but then we did see the move g5 by Jeffrey. Kind of a bold move there.
So That king b1 idea you were saying, I guess Jeffrey tried to prevent that with this bishop c5 move. Of course,
Yeah.
now it would be met with bishop d4 and
Yeah. No,
And
that
maybe-
bishop c5, maybe if knight c5, we would have seen king b1 by Rustam, but bishop c5, bishop d4, all of a sudden it's got to go the other way.
absolutely.
Got to go the other way. So he did, and although it looks like the king's kind of in the middle of the board again, we have to remember that the position is so closed up here.
Yeah.
And so the kings are not in as much danger as they would be in another type of open position.
Right. But yeah, so in keeping the position closed, he did give up that f5 square, right? So
Yes, yes, that was the price. I mean, Jeffrey's going to win that pawn. I don't think Rustam's too concerned about dropping the f-pawn. I mean, this knight is actually really strong in any type of endgame. Hitting that pawn, and then you've got this guy ready to go. But the question is about Rustam's pieces. I mean, at the end of the day, Black sort of, he seems to have done well in the last couple moves. He won a pawn. The king on e8 is actually quite fine. These bishops are looking very, very powerful. Oops, not from there. Very powerful from b7 and from c5. I'm a little uncomfortable here if I'm Rustam.
yeah, and again, like the problem piece is always the rook on h8, but of course in a closed structure like this, it seems like it's not going to be as important, right?
Right.
You've got time to try and extract that piece.
Yeah, the other funny thing is I can actually consider, I think I can consider castling, right? I haven't moved my
Oh
king
yes.
yet. So now I
you
could,
know.
now if I want to just, sometimes you forget
The
that
forgotten-
the guy's been choosing not to castle, not like
Right.
he couldn't. But yes, no, I think Rustam is going to play, as we see him move rook f1 on the board. I think ideally he would maybe like his king sort of tucked away over here if he could do that. If you move this bishop, I mean, this knight could be hanging in a few lines, like for example, if you castle. But otherwise, I think with a knight on c5 potentially coming in, we could see a lot of pressure on this position. Rustam is actually down 10 minutes on the clock here, and I think the pressure in this position for him might come from some sort of rook takes d7 and then loosening up this this
right.
rook on f6,
But
trying to
it's-
use the
yeah.
f file.
It's almost as though White's running out of squares for his pieces, right?
Yeah.
And so you might have to, accept some trades, some bishop f2 moves maybe, just to get his king where it needs to be and remaneuver.
Exactly. Yeah, and he might have to do this. The thing is, the closer we get to an endgame, these dark square pawns, I think they're going to favor black. The only thing is that this knight on f5 might be the savior for Rustam, hitting this pawn, and that's just a constant annoyance in any endgame. So we're talking about endgames. I don't even think we're going to make it to one. But with 10 extra minutes on the clock, I think Jeffrey is really going to spend some time and look to find some accurate moves here.
Certainly.
To make things uncomfortable for Rustam. It's funny, Black's king was the one who used to be in the middle of the board. Now White's joined him, and maybe his king is more exposed. I'm not sure.
Feels like that's something Jeffrey kind of specializes in, is at the critical moment really, taking a minute and finding the key move to really put his opponent under some pressure.
Right.
It does look like we have another result. I think Benjamin Bach drew Aryan Tari.
Okay.
But the big news, I guess, is it looks like VAR might have actually slipped up in his game here. And
Let's jump back
that
to that.
extreme
Both
time
of these
pressure.
games are in extreme time pressure. Kazimjanov down to a minute. Akobian made his last move with 4 seconds. And this is the game to look at here.
right.
What was it? Rook d8, maybe trade, and king takes d8.
It looks like e6 is just hanging, right?
Well, it certainly does. I mean, rook d8 was one of those moves that maybe you play quickly, but again, if I take, there's not a nice way to take that back because of all the pins.
Right.
So rook d8, actually, you have to play king takes d8. Not sure if Ray is thinking about a different move, like maybe check first. Maybe he's thinking about throwing this in and
Right.
some rook d6 idea. This is
looks
definitely
very nasty. Looks very nasty.
This is definitely a consideration. Let's remember knight d8 is not possible because queen takes c8 in this position. I'm actually not sure what to do here. This looks
Just looks crushing,
Yeah,
right?
this looks
I don't
crushing.
think VAR.
no. This looks crushing. After check, I might have to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I might have to go somewhere else. This is just a no, so it's got to be king c7 here, I guess.
Right, but even that, surely there's some way to
Yeah, well,
just
I
take
mean,
advantage of.
this looks like a great move. Rook d6 looks like a great move. Queen e6 is at the very least a decent move.
Right, of course,
Taking that pawn. But it feels to me like Ray sees, he smells blood here. Rook d1 looks like the big consideration. Queen takes e6, great move. So there's almost
Maybe allowing black to escape a little bit with something like queen to d7, and then trying to run somewhere with the king. But
Right. Yeah.
also should just be winning as well, I think, right?
Yeah, I think he's got a few ways to approach the position because maybe it's a tough decision. Sometimes you get that choice where everything's you feel like it's winning, but which one is more winning, or which one do you prefer?
And it's very hard to pass up, at least for me, when you see like, okay, I know for a fact I can take this e6 pawn.
Yeah.
But, rook d1 looks better, but I just have to, triple check, quadruple check, make sure I'm not just throwing away this free chance to
Exactly.
take a
You don't
pawn.
want to miss a free win. A queen takes e6, queen d7. I mean, there's also the like, hey, let me just like grab all your pawns technique.
Right.
And this can work very well too. So rook d1 looks like a very good move though, based on the calculations.
Seems to have been played on the board as well.
Okay, so he went rook d1.
And VAR very quickly played king c7.
Yeah, these king moves are not options. Rook d6 is game over, or queen takes c6, depending where you go. But king there, and now rook d6, knight d4, and queen e6 all come to mind here. Trying to decide which one is the best. Let's say if knight d4, threatening to play queen takes c6 check. Let's say queen b6 by black, and we have a choice here. But I feel like once that king gets down to b8, I don't necessarily have a follow-up. Maybe rook d6 first, puts more pressure, and then try to bring the knight in.
Yeah, still queen b6 here maybe, and then
Right.
somehow just king b7 trying to unpin everything.
Right. So now, now everybody's pinned. Now,
Yeah,
now it's like nobody can move. I'm inclined to play just a waiting move here because basically black is stuck, like rook takes e6 or something. It feels like I can almost
maybe.
just keep waiting. Is there queen takes d4 though? I think queen d4 is just good here.
Is there some? I guess there's not. I was thinking of rook e7, but I think king b6 is just fine for black.
Right.
Or
I thought everything was pinned, but everything wasn't pinned.
No, yeah.
So my knight is actually hanging, so I can't do that
Okay.
one. Knight takes d6, or e6 looks like a good move here as well. You really feel like you're spoiled for a move.
Yeah, I mean, there's always this simple option of bailing out and taking on e6, and then of course black's made a lot of weaknesses on the king side, so probably
Maybe this one too. This one, that's a real pin.
Okay.
That's an actual
found
pin.
one. We found.
And then I am threatening to sort of pick up all these pawns in the position. So, yeah, I don't think Ray is really the type to have problems in these, not conversions that are technical, but they're almost just tactical conversions at this point.
Yeah, just finding the right series of moves to really keep your opponent pinned down, keep him from escaping.
Right.
Let's see what else is going on. Do you want to check out a
How's
little
the
bit
B group looking?
in the B group? Yeah, it looks like Steingrimson has actually made quite a bit of progress in his game against Christian.
Yeah, we can check in with this one. I think that Kirilla is like absolutely lost, but I haven't seen exactly. But again, he's trying to make a comeback from two central pawns in the position, and this is not how your Grunfeld position is supposed to go.
No, of course not. And I guess that's an exchange sacrifice.
It is.
Actually, by
It
the way.
is. No, he's in a really weird position here. Knight h6, and he's hanging on by like the weirdest threads. But it does look like at the end of the day, because he's up the exchange, that he's always willing to sacrifice it back.
Right, yeah.
Something like
And
rook
it
takes d6.
Seems to be a day for weird configurations of pieces that all kind of hold each other together, just
Right.
barely.
I think that he's just played the move bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, and I'm not sure, has he played knight takes h7 on the board there? It looks like he did, yeah. I think that's a white knight on h7. So he's saying, like, I'm going to play knight h7, knight f6, and push all these pawns. Like, I've got 5 connected pawns here.
Yeah, certainly.
I think that might just be his game plan. White seems to be better here, but again, Kirilla seems to be the most slippery player in the event so far.
Very tough to pin that guy down. But
All
yeah,
that MMA training.
Once that f7 pawn drops, it seems as though there's nothing stopping white's center pawns. So feels to me like, black's pieces are really going to be tied down to that square specifically. Something
Yeah.
like knight g5 here, for example, and then...
Yep. Knight g5 has just been played by white. Move 31, these players at 3 minutes apiece. But it looks like Steingrimson is in control still. Despite the material, I think that was rather more of like an intentional sacrifice.
Right, yeah.
And Kirilla seems to be still playing from the back foot. But 9 more moves of time pressure to go. We'll see if he can turn his position around and have some good fortune.
Mm-hmm. It looks like Bersh Bullets is equalizing in his game against Mista. We've got a bishop endgame here.
So what was his choice? This was our important game to watch in the B group. And in this position, okay, he went for the move a3 and basically just went for the full 2-bishop type of endgame position.
Ah, all right.
And he wanted to simplify with the move g4.
Yeah, I guess that move makes quite a bit of sense.
Mhm.
And then, yeah. I guess this is winning the pawn back, but you're accepting maybe a slight weakness with the pawn on f5.
Yeah, they're going to be double pawns, and black sort of has this idea to go take it. I wonder if he's doing that. He plays king there, and I think it's because white was actually just going to walk all the way into b6 if he put that king over there. And maybe even being up a pawn,
Yeah.
you might risk losing.
Maybe there's also f4 for white if you...
If I play
aren't
king
careful.
f6, you mean?
Yeah,
Or-
king f6, maybe f4. I guess do you have
I'll
time to just play
probably-
g4?
I think I'll play. I mean, if I'm trying to show anything here, I gotta play
Right,
g4, and I'll still try to take this. And I've got the outside pawn now. It's a little dangerous with 2
Yeah, I'm not so
pawns.
happy with my move f4 now that
Yeah.
the pawn is just running. Originally, I thought I could just play king f2 and king g3, but you are in time to take my pawn on f5.
Right.
So
Yeah, if I'm playing white here, I like the fact that this guy's actually holding off the g pawn for the moment, and I think this is our current position here. Black, I mean, if he ever goes and sort of grabs this pawn, the white king invades over here,
right.
and you get the feeling that you're going to be able to. I mean, he's played the move. I think bishop e2, king e6 on the board, and we'll probably see something like this.
Yeah, it simply doesn't look like enough for black, right? The bishop can always sacrifice for the last pawn if need be, and
Let's say here, he's probably going to play this.
yeah, I guess I just saved the bishop somehow. Maybe bishop g4. Try to
Bishop
keep
there.
the king a little locked out.
Maybe king here, and he's trying to say that he can't take the pawn because of b4.
Maybe bishop c8 is possible.
He's making
the
making a game out of it, right?
Of course,
Because
there's the danger there, yeah.
I mean, I guess are we just gonna get some position where,
Yeah, just in time maybe to queen for both sides.
and then I think everybody just gets a queen safely here.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see this
everybody
kind of
everybody walks away with the queen.
right. So that's a long variation, but it almost looks like a variation that both of these guys have to at least consider very, very carefully.
Of course.
So yeah, I would say this one looks very drawish, right? That
Yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna win this endgame, and if anybody does, of course, it's not gonna be Bersh Bullets. It's gonna
That's
be
right.
Alexander Mista. So
that's right.
Bai Jinshi, feeling pretty happy about him, and actually it looks like we've got a result. Var has resigned his game against Ray Robson.
Wow.
So did
you can
not
see him
manage to
signing
find-
the score sheet there.
Find a way to escape.
Yeah, no, this rook d6 move followed by knight d4, it was just too many pins. It was sort of what we were looking at. He didn't even bother playing the move queen there because I think if I just take here, you're just permanently pinned. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing to do about that.
No way to even move the pieces.
So, yeah, in this position, you're also threatening those ideas like sometimes you have like rook takes c6 and knight d8. Sometimes knight c5 is a killer move. Plus, let's not forget, I can just keep taking pawns. So he plays
Right,
knight
yeah.
e5, blunders to queen d5, and I guess is there a reason rook d7?
Just
or?
knight c5, right?
Oh, just knight c5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the knight is hanging as well as the fork, and so there's no way to defend both.
Yep, that's nasty, and that's a win for Ray Robson, and Varakobian goes down here. The French has been really put out there. I mean, for better or for worse, Var sticks to his guns, and
Yeah,
he beat Ivanchuk in the French this tournament. So.
yeah, absolutely. That was quite a nice game from him, if I remember correctly. But Yeah. Do you want to take another look at that Jeffrey Zhang game? It seems like from the YouTube chat, I'm hearing some.
Well, this is
Some
the
serious
last
mistakes have been
matchup. This is the last matchup ongoing in the A group,
Right.
and it's pretty key for the tournament standings overall. As Kazimjanov can try to play spoiler here, right?
Absolutely,
Sit way
yeah.
down in the table, but he's sitting in a position where Jeffrey is getting lower and lower on time, and Kazimjanov seems to have improved his position
Yeah.
quite a lot since the last time we looked.
It's very confusing for me because, I might have forgotten the castling was legal, but I would assume Jeffrey remembers, and it seemed like a much more natural way to develop his pieces and get his king to safety than this weird king walk to d8 and c8.
It's funny because it looks like he castled queenside, but if we remember here, this rook is actually from here, and this rook came all the way from a8
Right,
at some.
yeah.
So some weird stuff. But what did Kazimjanov do that I like? I like this move: bishop c4, bishop d5, and he's trying to get rid of these light square bishops. That was something way early on in the game I mentioned he wants to do, and I mean he hasn't forgotten that. He's got his king on e2, but he remembers the principles there. Trade those light squared bishops, get access to those squares, and this knight is going to be like an absolute hero later on in any position. This is going to be a real thorn in Jeffrey's side. Takes, and we just shift the pieces to the c file where Black's king is now. So I think Jeffrey is actually feeling the pressure here. I think he's just made a move as well. King to b8, and now it's on Rustam.
Yeah.
Maybe king f3 looks looks
just-
reasonable.
To my eyes, I don't see why this king is on b8. I would rather still have it on g8 and take 3 less moves to,
Right, because
improve my
you have so
position.
many things to get out of the way of. From d8, you have to get out of the way of the d file.
Yeah.
Here, you have to get out of the c file. Here, you have to get out of the bishop. And even there, this is like bishop d5.
Absolutely.
So
There's no safe space over there. I don't
No.
know why Jeffrey chose this decision, but
if he makes it to a7, the promised land, maybe that's the safest square. But
could be.
I think that this is a very, very tense position as we see a trade of bishops on b5. I think that was bishop takes, pawn takes. And Rustam to
Yeah.
move. The reason I like Rustam's position is that I don't feel like I have to play it tactically anymore.
Right,
I
you
feel
know,
like even
just-
trading the queens, I'm happy because this guy is such a monster.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the classic saying, a good knight on a good outpost is worth a rook, and sometimes that manifests literally. The knight is pinning down Black's rook on
It
f6.
is, yeah.
And it really has no options to go anywhere until this knight is dealt with.
Yeah, rook d1 has been played, and I'm starting to really like Rustam's position. Despite the time, he's only 2 moves away from time control, and he's going to get that extra time. And I think it's just so comfortable. You sit there with your king on f3, king on e2 even. You can reroute this bishop, and there's just so many dark square targets for White's pieces to
Right.
attack with that
Yeah.
knight and bishop there. I think that Rustam is actually turning the tables, and what a spoiler that would be. That would give
Absolutely.
Ilya Nizhnik clear lead in the A group. So we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens there. But this is the last remaining game in the A group currently ongoing.
And just 2 more moves to play until the time control for them. It looks like they've got. They're pretty low on time, but it should be enough, right? Should be enough. It's
Right.
not so hard to find moves to play for White here, and then Black does have 5 minutes remaining. So
That's right. There's a game that we haven't taken a look at. I think that's Sergei Ehrenberg in the B group against Nicholas Theodoru. Now, I see that White has just made the 40th move. That was the move bishop d8. And so Black will follow suit and get that 30 extra minutes. But Ehrenberg was actually really low on time in this game. It started off as a Berlin. I think it was right around this point that Black actually had like a 1-hour time advantage.
wow. Yeah.
So he was clearly in some sort of theory, some sort of prep. He knew what he was doing. But that being said, Ehrenberg's position looks quite reasonable. I mean, he's got everything locked up, and there's just sort of an extra pawn sitting there on c7. Black has the 2 bishops, but that guy on c6, it's not doing very well there. If it could reroute to f5 and maybe get to c2, that starts to look really scary for White. But on its own, White has sort of the perfect structure to restrict that bishop.
Yeah, this is actually the only player in the tournament that I have some experience with. I've actually played Nicholas in a rated game before, and I did manage to lose that one. But something that stuck in my mind was, he played his prep very quickly. He played the opening very quickly, and then it seemingly, the first move out, he really got into a tank. So
Right.
It seems like, he really uses that time once he gets out of prep just to, be certain of his plan for the game and how he wants to continue.
Yeah, and I guess you may as well if you're as well prepared as some of these guys in the A and B groups here. I mean, you don't want to waste time in the opening because
Right.
the middle games that these guys are getting and some of the end games, I mean, we've seen so many examples in both groups in this Spring Classic so far where if they just had more time in the end game, we wouldn't be blundering as
Absolutely.
we've seen some incredible evaluation swings that really are caused by time pressure.
But yeah, so what did end up happening here? Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got this classic two bishop position, but Nicholas, I think, was really feeling the pressure from White's knight because the way that these pawns were arranged, once a knight arrives on d5, I mean, if you play c6, then you've got this pawn hanging.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then this long-distance bishop from h2 makes it really hard to stop. So he actually was forced to exchange those pieces off, and that's not something you generally want to do.
And yet, I guess this looks like an exchange of pawns Black is probably happy with, right?
Right.
Giving up c7 and b6, but taking b3, getting his rooks active.
Yep. And I think this was the last move of the game. Rook c to d2 was the move by Theodoru, and White still has to be careful here. I mean, there's ideas like bishop f4 and
Right.
getting mated for White. So this is not just a walk in the park here for either player. Despite White being up a pawn on the king side, that king is really locked away and it can be in some serious trouble.
Certainly some danger here. I guess rook takes f6 with check would actually be a losing move because of something like king g7.
Yeah,
although
it's looking that way.
we do see here on the camera, it looks like Christian has resigned his game, so he did not manage to come back despite having that extra exchange. It looks like the pawns were
Well,
simply too much.
The final position is a little bit remarkable as well, as White actually has 5 connected pass pawns.
Wow.
That's a lot. Dealing with 5 connected pass pawns, I mean,
There's not a piece on the chessboard.
I
that
think
can really-
everyone, Kirilla especially included, would prefer to be down a rook than
Absolutely,
5
yeah.
connected pass pawns. But just going back a little bit, the reason this was just such a easy conversion, despite the quote-unquote material that it looks like Kirilla has here for the piece, it's just that these pawns get going so fast. d5, d6, f4. I mean, this is just
Yeah,
beautiful.
there's nothing to do. Nothing
Yeah.
to do. And that f7 pawn does fall, and that was kind of the last, the last defender preventing these pawns from rolling through. And
Yeah. So this is Kirilla's tough outing. He had a tough game yesterday, which he
Right.
miraculously held to a draw, but now he sort of put a damper on his spirits. Did Stengrimson, who wins here late in the tournament. I don't think he's been having a great event either. So
No, but it's
Can finish
nice,
strong.
nice to see him walking away with a point.
right, he can finish strong still. The other game that's sort of developing in the B group is the one with Kaidanov and Sorokin, which we checked earlier. Now, this game was the one I think we were expecting maybe a 1-pawn advantage for White after some complications. He did actually go for this knight c2 move that you had mentioned a long time ago when we were on this game.
Right.
And it sort of seemed like one of those bailout options. You just have to get rid of that knight on c5.
Right, absolutely. But then, so White does just capture, and now
Mm-hmm.
rook d1.
And we're up 2 pawns here with White, but this guy looks like it's going to be captured, or if we could, that would be the one to grab.
There's some knight d4, I guess. And then maybe there's tactics. If you play bishop takes d7, I have bishop takes c6, right?
That's looking good. Probably why, as we're following the game, knight d4, he felt that he had to play knight takes d4.
Right.
Not falling for any tricks and saying, look, I'm going to take that pawn on d7 next, but I think this is just a big advantage for White here.
The strong
Open
d-pawn.
king, potential for a pass pawn here as well, and just basically no weaknesses for White at
Yeah.
all.
Nothing for Black to do really, but try and hold.
Yeah, so he's going to get these pawns going, and he's got a super strong pass pawn on c6, defended by the bishop. Black took the time after queen takes d6 to play rook e1 check. The idea being to grab that queen on d6. So king h2 more or less forced, and we did see him play the move queen takes d6, rook takes d6, and in this position he's having a bit of a think. But that is, we're well past move 40 here, so These guys
All
have
right.
their 30 extra minutes, and well, I don't see white just completely winning on the spot. I mean, black is going to put that rook on c1 and always be difficult to advance.
Yeah, it's tough to tell if this is enough to win, right? Maybe it relies on white doing something with the A pawn, maybe, trying to take advantage of that A5 pawn being a little bit sidelined while black is trying to prevent the pawn from pushing further. Can you see any winning ideas? Winning
Well,
plans?
if I could sort of trade this pawn for this pawn, that might be reasonable because it's really nice to control the queening square from a position that also defends my king. But
Right.
it's really hard to imagine that the move rook e2 doesn't get played because that forks 2 pawns, and I have the idea to play rook to c2 next and get behind that c pawn. So actually rook e2 is on the board, and that just looks very logical. Trying to take one of these.
Yeah, rook e2, if c7, then is rook c2 being played right away?
Well, do we have to play it? I mean, it seems just incredibly greedy not to play it.
Yeah, but then I was thinking maybe bishop c6 for white. Kept pieces on the board and also, threatens maybe eventually something like g4 and playing rook d8. Just getting that rook in front of the pawn.
Well, let's play this then. Let's play the greedy move.
Okay.
Rook takes.
So let's say, it's actually tough here, I guess. What if g4? Is there bishop e4?
Yes, I want to say. I want to say yes because I'm going to take and give you this check and grab your queen there.
All right. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's tough then. Maybe the c7 move isn't available to play, and we actually have the winner of the game against VAR waiting to come in here. Ray Robson is going to come in.
He hasn't joined us in the studio yet, so that's fantastic.
Should be interesting to see. So, Aman, if you want to, analyze a little bit more of this game or take another look at Ray's game, let's get him in the studio.
Absolutely. That'll be nice to be joined by Grandmaster Ray Robson after what looked like a very exciting game against VAR Kobian. So we have this game here between Kaidanov and Sorokin still going in the B group. We also had Ehrenberg and Theodoro in a rather interesting position, as well as the game between Barış Politz and Alexander Mista that I bring up on the screen right now. Barış Politz here. Both of these guys, by the way, hit time control, but it seems to me like there shouldn't be anything between them if white plays like king a5, for example. I'm trying to see what black intends to do here, but I imagine that these guys are going to be potentially shuffling pieces and just looking to draw this one, as I don't see a way to make progress here for either side, really. Black might consider stuff like this, but you can never do that while, the bishop is still here. So I think this one is probably headed towards a draw. Jumping back to the game in the A group, which is still going, the only one still going. Things have gotten pretty crazy in this one as players have actually hit time control, and Kazimjanov is already 6 minutes into those extra 30 as this position has gotten pretty complicated here. Early on, it looked like maybe Jeffrey was favored, but Kazimjanov seemed to be taking over in the last couple of moves. But in the meantime, we're going to be joined by Grandmaster Ray Robson in the studio. Haven't joined us so far, so it's really nice to have you here. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, nice to be here.
We just looked at the game that you played against VAR, and would love it, honestly, if you could take us through some of the highlights of the game and where you think things got interesting, because we saw that pawn sack early, and then things looked really interesting from that point on.
Well, yeah, I think it was already interesting right at the beginning where you said with the pawn sacrifice.
Right.
Yeah, VAR played the French as he usually does, and he's already played this line like
a few times this tournament.
This is like the third time or something in this tournament, so obviously he has some experience here, and I think he'd done pretty well. He hadn't lost any of his games. He might have even
I think he beat Ivan Shuk in one of them. So yeah, he sticks to his guns.
Yeah, so he plays a6, knight e2, and here he played queen b6, which he hadn't played before. I think he played b5 before, or bishop b7. So queen b6 is probably the most critical move, and here white has two ways to protect the pawn, either with the queen c1, or which I think is the main move, or rook b1. So I played rook b1.
Yep.
And now, probably the most critical way black could play is to play f6, challenging the center, and then c3, and now he could either take on d4 or just play bishop e7 and castle quickly and keep that pressure on white center.
Right.
But what he did is also probably completely playable. Queen a5 check. So now bishop d2, and he doesn't really want to take the a2 pawn. I can't trap him immediately, but his queen is not going to get out by itself. So he just goes back, and the idea is that he's misplaced my bishop. So it's kind of like I played rook b1 and my bishop from e3 back to d2, and his move was queen d8 to c7.
Exactly.
So it's kind of a...
Who came out on top here?
I mean, the rook on b1 isn't worse, but the bishop is. On the other hand, queen c7 isn't like what he would normally want to play. So
it's interesting.
So here's c3, makes sense, protecting the center, b5.
Yep.
And now f5.
Yeah.
And I knew of this idea, but I thought it's just unclear. I thought white has enough compensation, but I hadn't looked at anything deeply.
Right. I think we were wondering whether this was sort of something you had a real idea about, or this was sort of instincts and just...
I just thought it would be an interesting position.
Well, you're not wrong there.
Yeah. And he knew this. He said there was a game, I think with Shirov, which he said black won. So, yeah, he takes knight f4. So my knight gets this nice outpost on f4. Attacking d5, he's forced to play knight b6, and I get to develop my pieces really quickly.
This seemed pretty... This is how I would expect black to play, just sort of try to plug the position and hang on to that pawn.
He wants to put something on e6. Ideally, he might even want to put his knight d8, knight e6, but he might have to watch out for... Well, in the game, if he had done that, I might have had a4, a5 ideas.
Right.
So most likely he'll put his bishop on e6, but if he does it now, let's say...
right now?
I might have something like g4.
Right.
And if he takes, then knight e6 and knight g5, and his structure's kind of collapsing. So that's the one thing he needs to watch out for when he puts his bishop on e6.
Right. Make sure he's got that move covered.
So instead he played c4, which I don't think it's bad, but it just...
Was that surprising to you?
I think he could have just played bishop e7. I don't think I'm going to take.
Yeah, I was wondering whether he played c4 because he thought that you might take and open up the position, and it wasn't clear whether his king had a safe place to go. So.
Yeah, I think he also likes these structures with like the closed structures.
The closed
in the French.
positions.
I remember a long time ago I had a training with him. I think in like 2009. And he showed me some games where he was black in like the advanced French, where he played with c4.
Okay. Yeah.
And he just outplayed his opponent. So I think he likes that.
You're going back to the 2009 stories, and you're using it against him, right? Okay. But yeah, that using the tendencies. But yeah, c4 was played. I mean, like you said, it's not a bad move, but it does sort of make your life a little easier. It sort of clarifies the structure.
Bishop c2, bishop e7. That's logical. Here, I was debating whether to play b3 or a4. The only idea of a4 is like if a4 bishop e6. I was wondering like maybe I play rook a1 and try to make him decide what to do over there. Because I want him to castle kingside. I don't think he wants to castle kingside. If he does, then I have a clear target and I can start attacking him over there.
You can build up to that.
Because the structure is so closed, if his king just stays in the center, it's really hard for me to do anything. So that's kind of the issue. I think b3 was obviously logical, but then after bishop e6, for this to like really be working for me, I'd have to be able to play g4.
Right.
Which I still don't think he should take, but after g4, because if he takes on g4, I play knight e6, f e6, knight g5. And if bishop g5, bishop takes g5, and he can't castle queenside, which is good.
Kingside, looks
or
good.
kingside, and I'm taking g4 and rook f6. So
yeah.
The problem was after g4, I thought he'll just play queen d7, and if I ever take on e6, he's always taking back with the f pawn.
It's solid. And
now if I'm taking on f5, he can take back with a piece, first with the bishop, and then if I take again with the queen, I can take on c4 here. Then I thought maybe just d takes c4, and unless I can play d5 quickly, it's just not working for me.
Yeah, it has to be concrete.
So I couldn't really make anything concrete work, so I just continued slowly with queen e1. I want to put my queen on g3 probably, but after that I didn't really have a clear plan, but it's not clear what he's going to do either, because
his king doesn't have.
Yeah, he doesn't want to go
place.
kingside, obviously, but queenside. Then at some point I'll play a4 and open up the queenside.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what happened. We kind of both just made slightly useful.
Yeah, it seemed like everyone was sort of improving their position more or less.
Yeah.
H4 makes a
H4
lot
is
of
interesting.
sense.
Yeah, I want to play maybe H5 or just knight G5, and also just preventing him from playing G5. So A5 was surprising to me. I wasn't expecting him to try to open up the queen side because.
Yeah, this was a pretty inspired plan here.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought maybe he'd just play something like H6, or even if he just waited, because now it's clear he wants to play B4. But now, especially after he also played rook C8, his king is clearly stuck in the center. Yeah. And so if we open up the queen side, I think that's in my favor in general. And once the queen side is open, I'm going to be able to penetrate there, forcing his king to the king side, which is what I want. So I was actually happy that he went for this, this plan. So yeah, I just rerouted my bishop to E2. On C2 is also, there were some discovered attacks once the C file opened with his rook and the bishop. So I just put it on E2. And now, yeah, H6 is kind of funny. Such a tense position than just H6.
Just H6.
But now he has G5 ideas at some moment, potentially.
He's trying to expand everywhere on the board, it seems like.
Yeah, and here was like a critical decision. I had to choose between either playing rook D1 like I did, which is preparing to take on C4 and try to open up with D5, or I could have taken on C4 immediately. Those were my two options, I thought. So maybe BC4 immediately was better. And the idea is, let's say D takes C4, then rook D1. And he can never really put his knight on D5, which he'd love to, because I take E6 and then C4 is C4 pawn's hanging.
Right, yeah.
And in a lot of lines, I'll even sacrifice with, let's say, D5 next move. Knight takes D5, then I take the same thing, knight E6 and bishop C4, and I've opened up the position a lot. So after B takes C4, he could also play knight C4.
Right here.
Yeah. Bishop takes C4, D takes C4, rook F D1, and let's say bishop D5. I was thinking about E6. So now if bishop E6, I think I have D5, bishop D5, bishop E3, which looks like it wins the piece. So after E6, he can take with the pawn still. Queen takes G6, king D8, and you might think his king on D8 is really weak, but in a lot of these lines, his king in the center is really hard to get at. And somehow, once he gets to E6, F5 structure, it's hard to break through. So yeah, I thought I have maybe knight E5 here. Try to open the D file at least. Knight takes E5, D takes E5. And yeah, I just wasn't sure if this was good or not. He could just play king C7 maybe.
Just try to like almost, I don't know, establish some sort of blockade on D5.
Maybe I can just take B4 because my knight on F4 is good at protecting G2, but I wasn't sure about this.
Right?
Yeah. So rook FD1 is definitely less committal because if B takes C4 doesn't work, it could just be bad for me. So rook FD1, now I'm threatening to take C4 and
do
okay, if he's taking on C3, I'm at least fine. So he took and played bishop B4, which is interesting. I didn't think it would work, but maybe it is actually. So he's clearing the E7 square for his knight, which will be a really good protector of both G6 and especially D5 once I take on C4.
Yeah.
So if I play something slow like just rook BC1, he'll probably play knight E7, and I thought everything is protected.
Now if you ever take, he's always got it covered.
And I didn't think that was working for me. So the other way was bishop B4, which I had calculated and I thought was actually.
And did you think that this actually got kind of forcing at least the sequence that he went for, right? Take D5. Yeah, this. If I take on E6 instead of playing D5, then again the point is if Queen E6, I have the same idea of D5 and Bishop C4. Right. This is good.
But I thought he'll take back with the pawn again, getting the same structure. Queen G6, just Queen F7.
Queen F7 now.
And yeah, his knights protect those two pawns.
Yeah, it's annoying.
And yeah, everything is protected, and I have no breakthroughs. Now his pawn on C4 is quite strong. It's going to get to C3 and be very annoying. So I felt like I had to play D5 and go for this.
Yeah, I was saying it's one of those moves you just almost play without. You just need to play it.
And initially, I thought this was good for me. I thought I would at least have enough compensation, but then once we got closer, I realized that at the end of this forced line after Queen A7 check, makes sense getting out of the pin with check, takes. So initially I thought he'd have to take on C4,
right?
And then Queen takes C4, probably castles, and then I play something like Queen back to F4, and maybe king g7. And I have an initiative. I'm down a pawn, but I have ideas like h5, rook d6, e6. So, and he had very little time.
But
so
did you think that maybe something like this might be better than the game? Because the game is also quite a loose position and maybe tough to play in time pressure as well.
During the game, I was happy with this position for white. I don't know what it is objectively. Maybe he can just take a2 quickly if I try to play like rook d6 and just push his pawn. I don't know.
Who knows?
But I had missed g5 at first. By this time, I'd already expected it.
This move, yeah.
But yeah, I completely missed g5, which is a great idea. I can't take because of the discover check, and I'm almost just losing a piece. I have to play queen c1, so I'm fortunate that this line wasn't just losing. And now if he moves his knight to pin my bishop, I at least have a check. So I'm at least not losing the bishop, which is important.
Yep.
So after the game, he thought that knight e7 was just winning for him, but he missed that I have rook takes b4. So
right here, you mean?
Yeah, he thought this was winning, but I don't think I'm losing. I don't know if I'm better or not.
Sure.
I actually thought knight a5 maybe was interesting. And then bishop b5 check, king, he can go, even king e7 is interesting, because if he can exchange queens, he'd rather have his king up there. So let's say queen d2, queen c5, and he's just trying to get his rook to d8 and exchange queens. So, yeah, I wasn't sure about this. I thought maybe he's fine here. I can play queen d6 check, but I wasn't sure about the endgame.
Yeah. You're looking for more than
yeah, I was hoping for more. Like,
yeah,
his king was in the center. He didn't have any time at all. So, but instead of king e7 was probably a blunder. But castles was another option. But then it looked like I could play h takes g5. And the point is, if he plays knight e7, let's say, pinning my bishop, I just take on h6, rook takes c4, queen g5 check, knight g6, and now queen f6. And it's actually kind of sad for black that his knight had to go to g6 because he blocks rook g4, which would protect g7.
Right. Yeah.
And so now I'm just mating him
rook
on
h4
g7.
is covered as well. So.
But apparently, someone told me that the engine says castles is better for black because after castles, h takes g5, there's knight a5, g takes h6, and now queen e7. So he kept the e7 square open for his queen, and he guards everything. Now if queen f4, he does have this rook c4 and then rook g4 idea, blocking everything.
Right.
So yeah, apparently this one concrete line would have worked for him.
Okay. But he was also in a position where it's very tough to find these types of lines with the time situation.
Well, he played king e7, which is, I'm sure is a big mistake. Now after takes, and when he first played it, I didn't see anything clear, but then I saw queen c4. It's very strong. I want to play rook d6 and queen c4, but if I had gone rook d6 immediately, he'd have knight takes e5.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, queen c4 is the same idea.
It's kind of unfortunate that rook d8 is actually, like, he has to take with his king after.
Yeah, his knight is always pinned.
Right.
And if he takes on e5 with the knight now, I can take on b4 check, and then his knight on e5 will be hanging.
Yeah.
So I thought his only chance was after queen c4. I thought his only chance was knight a5, queen takes b4 check, queen c5 probably, because his knight at least controls b7. And if I play something like queen a4, maybe rook h d8.
Just rook d8.
Like rook takes d8, rook d8, rook b5, queen c1, king h2. And maybe it's still just winning. I didn't know. I didn't have time to calculate whether it was winning or not.
Yeah.
But otherwise, rook d6 was just coming and his position was crumbling. So he played rook d8 to stop that, but he had no good way to recapture.
Yeah, this is unfortunate. I think here you were just putting the finishing touches kind of on the calculations here. Rook
Yeah, I
D1
was just
looked like
trying
a
to
strong move.
decide. I was just trying to find a forced win.
Yeah, you have a lot of good options.
I think what I did was good. Rook d1, king c7.
Rook d6.
King b7 looked forced, knight d4. And here, if knight takes d4, then rook d7 check, king b8. I can take b4 check, and his queen is always hanging.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought queen b6 was forced, and then I was just going to take on e6 with the knight. And yeah, he's kind of tied down.
Pinned almost everywhere.
And I could have done the same thing with his king on b8, but I didn't, because here if queen f2 in this position, and the other line, if I ever take on c6, he can take back and he'll have perpetuals with queen h4 check, queen e1 check. But here if I take c6, rook c6, I have knight d8 check, and I take on c6 with the knight.
Yeah, no matter where he goes, it's a check.
And my queen protects h4, so I think it's just winning.
Yep.
So instead he played queen a4. which made it a little bit easier. Knight takes e6. Now my rook also controls d1, just in case.
Just no checks.
And his queen and king are on unfortunate squares. So.
Right, yeah. So then at this point, this is just queen d5 and something will fall.
Just take the knight, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, actually the end of that game, it probably came down maybe to castle or king e7. Like, it looked really complicated, but maybe he was even in with a shout at the end, but probably just because of the time pressure that he couldn't calculate all that, right?
Yeah.
Well, late in the tournament, it's nice to score a win. Obviously, there's one more round tomorrow, so be looking to see where you finish in the standings, but hopefully we get to hear from you again. That means another good result, and congrats on the victory today.
Thanks, yeah, and I don't know what's happening in Jeffrey's game, but I guess I have a chance to be tied for the lead again if he doesn't win.
No, in Jeffrey's game, I think this is the current position right now.
He's down 2 rooks? Is that
Jeffrey's
right?
position looked a little suspicious earlier. Queen takes e6 was the last move here, so.
Oh, okay. I didn't understand
Temporary.
what happened at first. Okay, so he's going to take the queen at some point, and he'll take the knight on d6.
And look for some checks there. We've seen some crazy games drawn by perpetual checks.
Yeah, and I'm actually playing Jeffrey the last game tomorrow. So.
Well, there you go. That sets the stage beautifully for the final round. Well, good luck in that game, and thanks a lot for your comments and joining us in the studio.
All right, thank you.
That's Grandmaster Ray Robson after his win against Varuzhin Akobian here in the A group. We're in round 8, and this is the final game ongoing right now. Rustem Kazimzhanov against Jeffrey Zhang. This one is really important for the tournament standings, as Jeffrey was currently, he was on top of the tournament table before the round, and Ilya Nizhnik is actually poised, along with Ray Robson, to take over that lead if Rustem Kazimzhanov can play spoiler here, which is looks like what he's sort of set out to do. He's way down on time, but this position looks like maybe the most Jeffrey can hope for is a perpetual. It's kind of hard to say. Queen g2 has just been played.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I'm back in the chair again. Super interesting interview from Ray there. That was quite the game he played with VAR. But
yeah, more to it than met the eye.
Absolutely.
At least they met my eye.
All right, so yeah, like you said, it looks like White's going to be material up if Black simply takes on e6. So Black is searching for a perpetual. Doesn't look like he's going to find one, I guess, is the question here.
Yeah, I think in the B group, Mista and Barsh Politz did draw, so it's actually Bai Jinshi who's really sort of cementing himself at the top of the leaderboard.
Absolutely.
In that one, Sorokin and Kaidanov still battling out, along with Ehrenberg and Theodoru, but I think it's this Jeffrey Zhang game which is the most interesting at the moment, as you got a queen hanging on e6, and he's played queen g2, but I don't believe in the perpetual. I'm sort of curious whether he can run his king away and whether he loses material in order to keep playing the game.
Right. There might also be some strange fork going on, right?
Had a lot of weirdly placed pieces.
It's more than I'm able to ever calculate, but
something like this. He wants to take here, and
right.
If queen here, we can always sort of defend things. Queen g3, also not an exact fork as king c2. So it does look like Kazimzhanov should be the one who's pushing here in this endgame, and he has played the move king d3. So Jeffrey's probably going to try to maximize that time advantage here.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's got to if he wants any chance.
Yeah, he also has to make use of it here, right? To really find out what's the best way to continue, or is the only move f takes e6 here actually?
Yeah, he has a few checks he can throw in first. Queen f3, queen e3 though, and wait a minute, I'm not getting that queen after all. So.
Yeah, you get the rook on d1, but the queen, I guess, is the more valuable of
maybe
the two
a little.
pieces.
Yeah, and we do see f takes e6, knight takes d6 on the board, and Kazimzhanov here is going to look to see if he can find some coordination. I think as soon as you sort of coordinate those pieces around and maybe connect the rooks or somehow get the knight back into the action, then you're doing fine. But this rook on a3 is actually really awkward at the moment, and something like queen d5, king c2, maybe even like queen c5 hits the rook. I'm wondering if there are any type of tricky checks where somehow I've got like 3 weirdly placed pieces, I can't defend them all.
Right, yeah. So with that game in mind, I guess it's time to, take a look at, our standings after round 8 and our pairings for the next round, see what's going to be going on. So yeah, with that draw, Ilya pushes his score up to 5, and Ray, taking that full point off of Varakobian, now joins him in the leading role. This Jeffrey Zhang game looks like it's totally up in the air. Could be a draw, could be a win, could be a loss, all depending on these next few moves here.
No, that game is totally up in the air, and it actually means quite a lot for the standings because we could have a 3-way tie at the top.
Absolutely.
And as you just heard from Grandmaster Ray Robson when he was in the studio, he's playing Jeffrey tomorrow in the final round. Right. So that could be a battle between 2 guys with 5 points right on top of the table.
Certainly a game to see. Just trailing them is Arantari at 4.5 points after today. So with a win tomorrow, he might also find himself, in a playoff for the win.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think anyone there in the 4.5, 5 group is poised to potentially share first place in the tournament. And don't forget, we do have those tie breaks, those playoffs,
absolutely,
if necessary.
And then, of course, trailing them, no blood was shed today, besides the Ray Robson game so far, and the rest of the field managed to draw.
Right.
And then let's check out the B group here, see how they're doing after round 8. So of course, Bai Xinji that we've been talking about all tournament, still in the lead by a full point with 6. So all he needs tomorrow would be a draw to secure the win.
That's right.
Boris Wolitz is the nearest trailer at 5 points with a draw today. And yeah.
Well, I think Alexei Sorokin, I think by looking at the tournament that he's in and the average rating, I would say about +1 is required for his norm. So he probably needs to hold this game, and let's say tomorrow score another draw.
Absolutely.
So he probably needs around 5 points, I would say, in this field. Don't forget, he was the lowest rated coming into this field. He was the bottom seed.
Right.
And it kind of depends whether he can hold this game today and how his game goes tomorrow. But he has got a few things on his mind. He's got that norm to also try to secure. All
right. Yeah. And then of course, Nicholas Theodorou, the other player looking for norms in this event, sadly not going to get them, it seems, with only 3 out of the 7 games. And
no, it would be, obviously he'd need to win his next 2 games, and I don't even know how that would look.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a lot of exciting broadcasts coming up, actually. Not only this tournament, but in a couple weeks here, we'll have the U.S. Championships and the U.S. Women's Championships actually going on right here at the St. Louis Chess Club. So we'll see a lot of these familiar faces back. We'll see Var here, we'll see Jeffrey here, we'll see Ray here, who was just in the studio.
Yep.
And yeah, that'll be a tournament to watch for sure.
No, that's always a really exciting tournament, and obviously pretty much all those guys, like Ray and Jeffrey, are in great form in this tournament, so it'll be exciting to see how they do in the U.S. Championship.
Yeah, and so tomorrow is going to be our final round, and if necessary, we will also be having the playoffs tomorrow, if that's accurate. So we're actually going to be starting early in case of those playoffs. So it'll be 11 a.m. tomorrow for the round start time. So the players will have to get up a little early. It's also
a little earlier.
Daylight savings time, so
a little more earlier.
That's another hour that they're going to have to deal with. And we'll be back here on the YouTube channel at 1:30 p.m. So be sure to join us. With that said, thanks for watching. Thanks for having me here, filling in for Ben. I had a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Tomorrow's going to be very exciting as we close out this tournament, and it looks like Bai Jinshi just doesn't need to lose, and he's our likely winner in Group B, but Group A is pretty much all up for grabs.
Up for grabs. Up in the air. All right. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.